This is the story of Bloody Street, a Benny Parker story. Benny Parker was his name and killing was his game. He awoke in a cinder block cell with moist walls from the sewer tunnel above him. An Australian general with only one good eye unlocked his door. Benny had served his time. His crime? He was in the way of a powerful person. He put his hands through his jail door so the general could remove the ropes from his hands. His wrists were bruised from the ropes. He was beaten up badly and given daily meals of milk and bread. With every step he took, his ribs rubbed together and his legs became weak. 2 guards helped him walk down the corridor of screaming prisoners, who were no doubt wrongfully accused and jailed for no reason. The guards helped him down a spiral staircase and then threw him in a canoe that would take him to a ship set for London. While he was en route to London, he had the opportunity to eat a ton of savoury foods that filled out his ribs and made him stronger. His room was adorned with only the finest details that was set for a man above his station. He asked one of the crewmen for a quill and paper. He started to make a list of those that had wronged him, more specifically, Judge Turnip. Judge Turnip was a dowdy fat man with a thick unibrow and beady eyes. He was also the most corrupt man in London. He's the cause of London consistently having a dark cloud over it. It used to be a vibrant, prosperous city, but he catered more to the rich than to the poor. Benny had his target and wouldn't stop until Judge Turnip was dead. The ship rolled into a smog-filled London port. Benny could barely see the London that he once loved. When he stepped off the ship and onto the sewage-stained cobblestoned path, his heart sank. There was no one there to greet him. He had been sending letters to his beloved wife Mandy every day that he was locked up. Although he never got a letter back from her, he was sure that she had received it. He walked over drunks to get to the port teller looking for room and board. He told him about a small but available room over Miss Beloved's bakery shop. He walked a mile to the humble-looking shop and knocked on the front door. Miss Beloved immediately opened the door and kissed Benny on the mouth and dragged him in. It has been a while since a handsome man came into her shop. Well, handsome in her eyes. He wiped his mouth and told her that he only wanted a place to sleep. She told him the upstairs apartment was open and he could work in the bakery. He figured it was the perfect cover story for the murder he was planning. He went upstairs to find that the room was just as bad looking as Miss Beloved. At that point he didn't care and just wanted a good night's sleep. The next day he left his room to look for his wife. He went back to their old house and looked through the window to find that someone else was living there. When he knocked on the door, a slender man walked out and asked him to leave. Benny told him that he lived there once and was looking for his wife Mandy. The slender man told him that no one has lived here for years, but that the description of the woman sounded like Judge Turnip's wife. Benny stepped back in shock. It couldn't be. He decided to check for himself. He ran to Judge Turnip's house but was stopped before he could get to the rich part of town. 2 officers stopped him and told him that he couldn't go through unless he had a reason. Benny looked around and saw that several men were going through had barrels and carts filled with goods. He turned around, went down the block, stole someone's barrel filled with dirt, put on a hat, and was able to get past the guards. He walked up to this pristine and white house. It was the only gated house on the block, with large columns and tall windows. Benny put his barrel down and walked up to the house to see that his wife was putting on makeup at her vanity. She had lovely long blonde hair and the fairest skin. She was like a dream to Benny. This man walked up behind her and kissed her. Judge Turnip. Benny's blood began to boil. How dare Judge Turnip touch his wife? The bad part was that she didn't even push him away. It was almost as if she loved him as well. Benny's mood went from rage to disappointment. He had hoped that Mandy would have waited for him, but it seemed that she didn't. Not only did Judge Turnip take his wife, but he imprisoned him for no reason at all. Benny didn't want to waste any time in getting his revenge. He had to put his plan in motion. He went back to his room, and when he opened his door, he found that Miss Beloved was on his bed in her undergarments. She was posed on his bed as if she was waiting for her lover. Benny angrily grabbed her by her hair and dragged her out of his room with her kicking and screaming. He slammed the door and got his list out of his pouch. He was determined to undermine Judge Turnip where it would hurt. His money. At the top of his list was Judge Turnip's accountant. He handled all of Judge Turnip's misdeeds and made sure his books were balanced. The next day, Benny went to his accountant's office and knocked on his door. Benny didn't give him time to say hello before he took his knife and slit his throat. He caught his body before it hit the floor and laid him on his couch. Benny took some statues and valuables that were around his house and left. He had one revenge down and was just getting started. He went through his list one by one for every person that had ever wronged him or was close to Judge Turnip. One night, after killing Judge Turnip's barber, he went back to his room to rest and found Miss Beloved in his room again. She was fully clothed, thankfully, and had this smug look on her face. She said that she knew what he had been up to and she wanted to help him. Benny was surprised and said no at first, but thought it would be a good idea to have an accomplice. They spent the next several weeks plotting and killing all of Judge Turnip's friends and family members. They gave no mercy and burned their bodies in Miss Beloved's fireplace in her shop. There was only one name left on the list, Judge Turnip. Miss Beloved whispered in Benny's ear about Judge Turnip's wife being added to the list as well. Benny didn't tell her that Mandy was his wife and not Judge Turnip's. He couldn't bring himself to kill her, although he had every right to do so since she betrayed him. He told Miss Beloved no and to keep her eye on the prize, Judge Turnip. His routine was simple. He got up every morning at 6 a.m. to eat a whole chicken, ham, potatoes, corn, 2 poached eggs, and ale. Benny couldn't believe that he was still able to breathe after eating all of that. Around 8 a.m. he went to the courthouse to sign lives away to rot in a prison, without a reason and without a trial. He left the courthouse around 6:30 p.m. but insisted on walking with guards. On his way home he would always stop at a local brothel and leave his guards outside his room. That was the perfect time to kill him. As much as it disgusted Benny, he asked Miss Beloved to pose as a lady of the night for Judge Turnip. Nothing excited her more and grossed out Benny at the same time. That night they put the plan into action and Benny had a deal with the madam of the brothel. Judge Turnip showed up to the brothel as scheduled and went into his favourite room. The 2 guards were outside listening when Benny crept up behind one, slit his throat, and then plunged his knife into the other guard in one motion. They were both dead. Benny kicked open the door to find Miss Beloved and Judge Turnip in a position he never wanted to see again and immediately lunged for Judge Turnip. There was a struggle as Judge Turnip tried to get the knife out of Benny's hand. He managed to do so and punched Benny in his eye, knocking him on the ground. Judge Turnip got on top of Benny and started to choke him. Miss Beloved got behind Judge Turnip and slit his throat. He grabbed his bleeding neck and fell over to the floor, grasping for air. Benny took in a deep breath while holding his neck. He stood up and started yelling at Miss Beloved for taking his revenge away from him. She told him that he should be grateful and that Judge Turnip would have killed him. His blood began to boil as he was tired of everyone and most of all Miss Beloved. He put a smile on his face, told her thank you, and gave her a hug. Miss Beloved was so happy to get a hug from him that she wasn't expecting the knife that Benny plunged through her back. He took the knife out and stabbed her 4 times before letting her body drop. Benny stood back and watched as the blood from their bodies wrapped around his feet. He had his revenge and was happy that it was all over. Now he can finally be with his wife. He raced over to Judge Turnip's house, burst through Mandy's bedroom. She was sitting by the window reading a book. When she looked at Benny, she had this horrid look in her eyes as if she didn't recognize him. Benny looked at himself and realized that he still had blood all over him. He stood beside Mandy and got down on bended knee, pleading her to leave with him. Judge Turnip was dead and they could finally be together. Mandy stood up and told Benny to stay away from her. She was going to tell the police what he had done. Benny had this shocked look on his face. He couldn't believe what he had heard. Mandy was supposed to love him. After all the killings he had done, she was supposed to love him. Benny told her that Judge Turnip had wrongfully imprisoned him for 15 years. He fought to get back to her. Mandy already knew, since she was the one that told Judge Turnip to imprison Benny. She had the chance to live the life of a wealthy woman and took that opportunity. Benny was never going to give her the life she deserved. Benny was hurt by this. His sweet Mandy, sweet, delicate neck Mandy. Benny lunged at Mandy, gripping her neck tightly. Her eyes were huge and shock filled her face. He had tears running down his face, but it had to be done. Benny had been fooled into thinking he could have the life that he once had. Mandy took one last small breath, and Benny watched as the life in her eyes slipped away. Benny fell to the floor, crying uncontrollably. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The end.